In the previous lesson, you learned how to link an external CSS style sheet to an HTML document. Now what you're going to cover is the difference between classes and IDs and how we can use them to style elements on our web page. So on our web page here, let's say for example that we have two tags here, or two elements that are the same, or two headlines, and let's say we wanted to style one a certain color, but we wanted the other one to just kind of remain the way it is, or just style it differently. So we can do this with IDs or classes. Now, in order for this to work correctly, I'm going to have to change this H2 to be an H1, just to kind of give you guys an example. Let's go down here, and I'm going to change the H2 to an H1. So now we have two H1 tags. And what I'm going to do is, I'm just going to refresh the page here. So now they're both the same, and now let's say I want to style one different than the other. What we're going to do is we're going to use the class to do that. So back into our HTML, I'm going to go to the H1, I'm going to add class equals, give the class a name. I'm going to go with main title here. And then I'm going to copy that name title, and we're going to go back into our CSS, and we can actually target that main title class and give it specific styling that it will only be applied to elements with that class. So I'm going to go dot main title, and the dot in front of it will let our CSS style sheet know that we're working with a class. And inside our main title here, we are going to change the font family and change the style of our font family as well. So I'm going to go ahead and type out the font family CSS property, and I'm going to add a font family. Now you can go online and look up the different font families that there are, but I'm just going to copy and paste one here that I found off the internet. And this font family that I'm going to use in this specific case is the Courier New Font Family. And you can find like a giant list of CSS font families just by doing a quick search on Google. Just search up CSS font families. But let's save this document. Make sure you save to your index.html document as well. And let's see if this changes the way our element looks. And if I refresh the page, we can see that the font family, the font styling of our element has changed to match the Courier New Font Family. So that's pretty cool. That's how we can target one element and keep the other elements differently. We can also use classes to target multiple elements with the same class. So if I went ahead and gave our other H1 this exact same class, then that styling will also be applied to this element as well. So if we have a bunch of elements we want to style the same, we can just give them the same class name. For now, I'm going to go ahead and give our other H1 a different class, just so we can get some practice working with classes. And I'm going to give it the class name of name. And I'm just going to double check. Make sure that your names are exactly spelled the same because they are case sensitive. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to change the font size of this H1 element with the font size CSS property. So I'm going to change the font size to 19 pixels. And let's see how that looks in our browser. If I refresh the page, it doesn't look like anything's happening. Let's try saving both documents, and there we go. Now we can see that our font size actually has gotten smaller since the default font size of an H1 is much larger. Let's try 28 pixels and let's see what that looks like. There, we can see it's a little bit bigger now. Let's go ahead and make that even larger. Let's try 38 pixels. And you can see as we increase the pixels, our text grows bigger, and if we decrease the number of pixels, it goes smaller. But as you can see, we have two different elements that have two different classes with two different stylings. Now I'm going to go ahead like I talked about earlier, and I'm going to give our other H1 element the same class as our second one. So I'm going to go ahead and give this the class name of main title. And if I save the page after that, we can see that the CSS styling that I apply to this H1 element will be applied exactly the same. And I'm also going to go ahead and change that to an H2 as well. But again, we can see that the styling is exactly the same. We're using the same font family that we used for the other element. So that's a nice quick way to add certain styling to multiple elements that you want to style the same. Let's do a little bit more experimenting with font families. I'm going to add a new font family here, and this is called the Helvetica, I hope I'm saying that correctly, Helvetica font family. And if I save the page, again, we can see that the font family has changed and both elements get that styling. So again, a lot easier to style CSS properties by giving them the same class, assuming that we want to style them exactly the same. Now, you probably have a good understanding of how to work with classes and use them to style certain elements in CSS. Now let's talk a little bit about IDs. So down in the footer here, under our HTML document, I'm going to add a little bit of code, and we're going to use an ID to style that code. Now, IDs are exactly the same as classes, except for one big difference. An ID can only be used once on a web page. So classes can appear multiple times and give certain elements the same styling, but IDs can only appear once. If you put them more than once, you get an error. So we can use IDs to add a certain element or give a certain styling, but make sure that we're only, there's only be one of that ID on the page. It's kind of like a fail-safe kind of mechanism. So I'm going to give our P or paragraph element the ID attribute, and I'm going to give it the name of copyright, so that we know this is the copyright paragraph of our web page. And we target an ID in CSS by using this pound symbol. And I'm going to type in our name of our ID, which is copyright. You can see that it also changed color in our style.css Notepad++ editor. And I'm going to give it the font style of, I think we're going to go with italic here. Alright, so we'll save this here. Make sure you save your HTML document as well. And if I refresh the page, and we can see that the text that we put in our footer now appears here. It also has that kind of styling, that italic styling I used as well. So this is how we can use IDs and classes to style certain elements on our web page with CSS. Now I'm also going to add a margin top here. Let's go with 50 pixels, and what this does is this is going to add a little bit of spacing to the top of our copyright element, which is the paragraph element. So again, if I refresh the page, we can see here that this pushed it down and added a little bit more space. That's what a margin does in CSS. Great job! Let's continue on with the course.